He traded the woman who built him for a trophy wife, leaving her penniless and shattered. 3 years later, tech billionaire Donald Scott walked into a restaurant and dropped his glass. There sat his overweight, discarded ex-wife, laughing, glowing, and wrangling triplets who shared his exact, piercing green eyes. Long before the custom-tailored Italian suits and the sprawling Silicon Valley estate, Donald Scott was just a desperate man with a laptop and a dream that was rapidly running out of funding. And Rachel was his anchor. Rachel Higgins wasn't just his wife. She was his lifeline. In their cramped, drafty apartment in Portland, Oregon, she was the one who worked grueling, consecutive shifts. By day, she managed the chaotic front desk of a dental clinic, and by night, she waitressed at a 24-hour diner, coming home with clothes smelling of stale grease and spilled coffee. Every spare dollar she earned went into keeping the lights on and paying the server costs for Donald's fledgling data compression software, OmniStream. For 5 years, Rachel poured her youth, her energy, and her health into Donald's ambition. But the relentless stress took a heavy toll. Surviving on a diet of cheap, processed food, combined with chronic sleep deprivation and an eventual diagnosis of polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, Rachel's body began to change. The petite, energetic girl Donald had married slowly disappeared under layers of weight. She became heavy, her face rounding out, her clothes tight and uncomfortable. She didn't have the time or the money for gym memberships or organic meal prep. She was too busy keeping her husband from starving. Donald noticed the changes, of course, but back then, when he was nobody, he kissed her forehead, buried his face in her soft, generous curves, and whispered, "When we make it, Rachel, I'm going to give you the world. You'll never have to work another day in your life." Then, the impossible happened. OmniStream caught the attention of a major tech conglomerate. Within a span of 6 months, Donald went from begging for angel investments to signing a buyout deal worth $85 million. The struggle was over. They had won. But victory, Rachel soon learned, was far more destructive than poverty. As Donald's bank account swelled, his social circle morphed. Suddenly, he was attending elite galas, charity dinners, and high-stakes networking events. The men he rubbed shoulders with were accompanied by women who looked like they stepped out of fashion magazines, slender, polished, and impeccably groomed. Beside them, Rachel felt like a glaring anomaly. She tried to fit in, buying expensive gowns, but the judgmental whispers in the marble hallways of country clubs were deafening. She was the fat wife, the awkward remnant of Donald's humble beginnings. Donald's reassurances stopped. He began attending events alone, claiming it was just boring business. He grew cold, distant, and intensely critical of her appearance. He suggested she see a nutritionist, hire a personal trainer, or consider surgery. Every comment was a subtle stab at the woman who had sacrificed her metabolism and youth to fund his empire. The final blow came in the form of Chloe Davenport. Chloe was a high-powered PR executive hired to manage Donald's new public image. She was 30, ruthlessly ambitious, and possessed a sharp, severe beauty. She was a size 0, wore designer stilettos, and looked at Rachel with a poorly concealed mixture of pity and disgust. The affair was painfully cliché. Rachel found the text messages on Donald's phone on a rainy Tuesday morning. When confronted, Donald didn't even have the decency to lie. He sat across from her in the massive kitchen of their new mansion, his expression hardened into a mask of cruel pragmatism. "We're in different places now, Rachel," Donald had said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You gave up on yourself. I need a partner who can stand beside me in this new life, not someone who hides in the shadows and holds me back. Rachel had stared at him, tears streaming down her plump cheeks. I didn't give up on myself, Donald. I gave myself to you. I worked 80-hour weeks so you could code. I ate ramen so you could buy server space. And I'm grateful, he replied, sliding a folder across the granite island, which is why my lawyer, David Harrington, has drawn up a very generous settlement. It wasn't generous. Donald had used high-priced legal loopholes to protect his newfound wealth, claiming the intellectual property was conceived prior to their marriage. David Harrington, a shark in a suit, crushed Rachel in the mediation room. Broken, exhausted, and profoundly humiliated by the man she had loved for a decade, Rachel simply gave up. She signed the papers, accepting a modest $500,000 payout, a fraction of his worth, packed her bags, and vanished. Donald married Chloe 6 months later in a lavish ceremony in Lake Como, Italy. He thought he had cut away the dead weight. He thought his perfect life had finally begun. 3.5 years later, the golden veneer of Donald Scott's perfect life had cracked, revealing a hollow, echoing emptiness beneath. His wealth had tripled, but his misery had grown exponentially alongside it. Chloe, it turned out, loved his Black American Express card far more than she loved him. Their marriage was a sterile transaction. Their massive, ultra-modern home in the Seattle Hills felt like a museum, devoid of warmth or laughter. Chloe despised the idea of ruining her figure with pregnancy, and her sharp tongue, which Donald had once mistaken for wit, was now a constant source of belittlement. He found himself waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, haunted by the memory of a cramped Portland apartment that smelled of cheap coffee and unconditional love. It was a brisk Sunday afternoon in late September when the past violently collided with his present. Donald and Chloe were having brunch at Le Petit Jardin, an exclusive, sun-drenched restaurant known for its exquisite French cuisine and sprawling outdoor patio. Chloe was aggressively picking at a kale salad, complaining loudly about the incompetence of their interior designer, while Donald mechanically sipped his scotch, his eyes glazed over with boredom. Seeking a momentary escape, Donald let his gaze drift across the bustling patio. Past the manicured hedges and the bubbling fountain, a burst of bright, chaotic laughter caught his attention. His eyes locked onto a woman sitting 3 tables away. She was wearing a stunning, flowing, emerald-green wrap dress that caught the autumn sunlight. She was still a plus-sized woman, her curves prominent, but there was nothing defeated or awkward about her. Her skin was glowing, her dark hair cascaded in thick, healthy waves down her shoulders, and her smile was radiant. She looked vibrant. She looked beautiful. Donald's breath hitched in his throat. The heavy crystal glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the cobblestone patio with a sharp crash. "Donald! Jesus, what is wrong with you?" Chloe hissed, recoiling from the splash of scotch. He didn't hear her. The ambient noise of the restaurant faded into a dull ringing. It was Rachel. But it wasn't just Rachel that had caused his heart to stop. It was the absolute chaos unfolding at her table. She wasn't alone. She was wrangling 3 toddlers, 3 little boys, all dressed in matching navy suspenders and white button-down shirts, were engaged in a full-scale assault on a plate of croissants. One was laughing hysterically, throwing flakes of pastry into the air. Another was solemnly dipping a strawberry into a glass of water. The third was sitting quietly, his brow furrowed in intense concentration as he stacked sugar packets. Donald's mind raced. 3 boys, triplets. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping violently against the stone floor. "Where are you going?" Chloe demanded, her voice shrill. "I'll be right back," Donald muttered, his voice trembling. He moved like a man in a trance, navigating his way through the maze of tables, unable to tear his eyes away from Rachel and the children. As he closed the distance, the details of the boys became agonizingly clear. They were about 3 years old. They had thick, unruly, dark curls. But it was when the quiet one, the one stacking the sugar packets, looked up at him that the air was completely knocked from Donald's lungs. The boy had striking, piercing green eyes. Not just any green. A rare, vivid jade color. And when the boy smiled at his mother, a deep, distinct dimple appeared on his left cheek. It was the Scott family dimple. It was the exact shade of Donald's own eyes. Looking at the boy was like looking into a temporal mirror at a photograph of himself from 30 years ago. Panic, absolute and terrifying, seized Donald's chest. He stopped dead in his tracks, hiding behind a large potted ficus tree, his brain frantically doing the math. 3.5 years ago, he had asked for the divorce in November. But late October had been Rachel's birthday. He remembered that night with sickening clarity. He had already started seeing Chloe. He had already planned to leave Rachel. But he had come home to find Rachel crying, overwhelmed by the cruelty he had been showing her. In a moment of weakness, driven by a toxic mix of guilt, pity, and a ghost of his old affection, he had taken her to bed. It was the last time they had touched. He had served her papers 3 weeks later. She had signed the papers in January and vanished. She had never asked for alimony. She had never contested the blindingly unfair settlement. She had just disappeared. Oh my God, Donald thought, his hands gripping the bark of the ficus tree so hard his knuckles turned white. She was pregnant. She knew she was pregnant, and she didn't tell me. He watched as Rachel wiped the face of the messiest boy, her expression one of pure, unadulterated love. She looked so happy. She looked wealthy, too, not in the flashy, desperate way Chloe did, but comfortable. The emerald dress was high-quality silk, and a subtle, expensive-looking diamond pendant rested on her chest. "Leo, stop throwing the food, honey." Rachel's voice drifted over to him, soft and melodic. "Finn, leave your brother's ear alone. Arthur, eat your fruit." Leo. Finn. Arthur. Donald's knees felt weak. He had 3 sons. He was a father to 3 boys who were exact, undeniable replicas of him, and the woman he had thrown away like garbage was raising them without him. A surge of possessiveness, guilt, and a desperate, clawing need overwhelmed him. He couldn't stay hidden. He had to know. He had to confront her. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Donald stepped out from behind the foliage and walked directly toward their table. As his shadow fell over the white linen tablecloth, Rachel paused. She slowly looked up from the napkin she was holding. For a second, her face was blank. Then, the recognition set in. The warm, radiant smile vanished instantly, replaced by a wall of absolute, freezing ice. Her eyes, which had been sparkling with joy just seconds before, hardened into obsidian. "Rachel," Donald whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies. Rachel didn't flinch. She placed the napkin down, pulled her son Finn a little closer to her side, and looked the billionaire squarely in the eye. "Can I help you, Mr. Scott?" she asked, her voice so coldly detached it made the blood freeze in his veins. "Mr. Scott?" The formality of the title hit Donald like a physical blow. He stood frozen by the table at Le Petit Jardin, his expensive Italian shoes rooted to the cobblestone. He looked from Rachel's fiercely guarded eyes to the 3 toddlers currently oblivious to the tension, their faces smeared with butter and jam. "Rachel," Donald choked out, his voice a raw, desperate whisper. They are exactly my age when—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He pointed a trembling finger at the boy named Arthur, whose jade-green eyes were locked onto Donald with innocent curiosity. He has my eyes. He has the Scott dimple. Rachel casually picked up her cloth napkin and dabbed the corners of her mouth. Her hand did not shake. Her pulse, from what Donald could see, was maddeningly steady. "Genetics are a fascinating science, Donald," Rachel replied, her tone conversational but laced with absolute frost. "But biology does not equate to family. Now, if you'll excuse us, we are celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Donald demanded, a sudden irrational anger flaring up to mask his panic. "That you hid my children from me for 3 years? That you committed paternity fraud?" Rachel let out a short, melodic laugh that made several heads turn on the patio. It was not a laugh of fear. It was a laugh of genuine amusement. "Fraud?" Rachel tilted her head, her dark curls catching the autumn breeze. "You might want to consult your pit bull of a lawyer, David Harrington, before you throw around legal terms in public. You served me divorce papers 3 weeks after my birthday. You evicted me from our home in under 48 hours. When I found out I was pregnant the following month, I had my attorney contact David to halt the mediation. Donald felt the blood drain from his face. "What? David never told me that." "Oh, he didn't?" Rachel feigned surprise. "David told my lawyer that you were entirely uninterested in any delays or extortion attempts, and that if I claimed to be pregnant, you would drag me through a 10-year defamation suit." She leaned forward, the diamond pendant catching the light. "You told your lawyer to sever all ties, past, present, and future. And he did." Before Donald could process the betrayal of his own legal counsel, a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying temples and a warm smile approached the table. He was carrying a tray of decadent French pastries. "Sorry for the wait, darling," the man said, kissing the top of Rachel's head before placing the tray down. He looked at Donald with mild confusion. "Can I help you?" "Donald, this is Dr. Thomas Arris." "My fiancé," Rachel said, the word fiancé echoing in Donald's ears like a death knell. "Thomas, this is Donald Scott, an old business acquaintance." Thomas's eyes flickered with instant recognition. He knew exactly who Donald was. He placed a protective hand on Rachel's shoulder, his friendly demeanor cooling instantly. "Mr. Scott, I believe you're interrupting our family brunch." "These are my sons," Donald blurted out, ignoring Thomas. "I have a right to them. I have billions of dollars, Rachel. You think you can just keep them from me? I will bury you in court. I will hire every family lawyer in the state." Rachel didn't flinch at the threat. She simply smiled, a terrifying, pitying smile. "You really haven't kept up with the industry news, have you, Donald?" Rachel asked softly. "What does industry news have to do with my children? Never underestimate the woman who stood behind you when you were nothing. She knows exactly how you were built, and she knows exactly how you can be dismantled. When you paid me that insulting $500,000 settlement," Rachel explained, her voice dropping to a low, lethal timbre, "I didn't buy shoes or go on a European vacation. I took my 10 years of experience running medical clinics, and I hired a team of developers. I knew the back-end inefficiencies of medical coding better than anyone. I built MedFlow AI." Donald's jaw went slack. MedFlow AI, OmniStream's biggest rival in the healthcare data sector, the startup that had just secured a massive $200 million contract with the Pacific Health Hospital Network. It had been the talk of the tech world for months, founded by a reclusive CEO. "You," Donald breathed. "Yes." "Me," Rachel said, her eyes flashing with triumphant fire. "I am the CEO of MedFlow. I don't need your billions, Donald. I have my own. And unlike yours, mine wasn't built on the broken back of a spouse. Now walk away, before I have security remove you." Donald stumbled backward, bumping into a waiter and nearly knocking over a tray of mimosas. He looked at the boys one last time. Leo, Finn, and Arthur. His blood. His legacy. Surrounded by the warmth and wealth of the woman he had discarded for being too fat, too plain, too much of a burden. He fled the restaurant, the sound of Rachel's laughter burning like acid in his veins. The following Monday, Donald sat in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of a prestigious Los Angeles law firm. He had bypassed David Harrington, whom he had violently fired the night before, and flown directly to California to secure the services of Laura Wasser, the most feared and revered family law attorney in the country. Wasser sat across from him, impeccably dressed, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose as she flipped through the thick file of Donald's divorce decree from 3 years prior. "I want joint custody." Donald paced the length of the room, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless weekend. "I don't care what it costs. I want my sons. She hid them from me." Wasser closed the file and took off her glasses. She did not look intimidated. She looked faintly amused. "Mr. Scott, sit down," she instructed. The authority in her voice made him obey. "You didn't read the addendums of your own divorce settlement, did you?" Wasser asked, sliding a highlighted page across the mahogany table. "David handled the fine print. He was supposed to protect my company," Donald defended. "Well, he certainly protected it," Wasser said dryly. "He drafted an aggressive, unilateral preemptive waiver. In his zeal to ensure Rachel could never come after your future wealth, he included a clause that explicitly terminated your paternal rights to any and all undisclosed biological offspring conceived during the tenure of the marriage. It's a highly unusual, almost draconian clause, usually reserved for sperm donors." "It can be overturned." Donald slammed his fist on the table. "I didn't know they existed." "She tried to tell your lawyer. You have a documented email trail from her counsel attempting to disclose the pregnancy, which your lawyer explicitly rejected in writing, citing your refusal to entertain frivolous delays," Wasser pointed out, her tone devoid of sympathy. "Furthermore, Rachel Higgins is now a high-net-worth individual in her own right. She resides in a secure estate in Bellevue. She has a stable environment, a spotless record, and an impending marriage to a prominent pediatric surgeon. No judge in this state is going to uproot 3 thriving toddlers to hand them over to a man who legally disowned them to protect his stock options." Donald buried his face in his hands. "So, I have nothing. Legally, you are a stranger to those boys," Wasser confirmed. When Donald returned to his sprawling Seattle mansion, the nightmare compounded. The paparazzi had already caught wind of the scene at Le Petit Jardin. Blind items about the tech billionaire's secret triplets were flooding the internet. Chloe was waiting for him in the foyer, her face a mask of sculpted rage. Surrounded by designer luggage, she hurled a crystal vase at him the moment he walked through the door. It shattered against the wall, inches from his head. "Triplets!" Chloe screamed, her perfectly manicured hands balled into fists. "You have 3 bastards with that fat cow, and you made a scene in public over it? You humiliated me." "They are my sons, Chloe!" Donald roared back, the remnants of his patience snapping. "They are a liability," she shrieked. "My publicist's phone is ringing off the hook. I am not playing stepmother to some Oregon receptionist's litter. We are done, Donald. My lawyers will be in touch. And since we didn't update the prenup after the latest stock split, I am taking half." Within a month, Donald's perfect life had disintegrated. Chloe's highly publicized divorce proceedings dragged his name through the mud, exposing his infidelity and his ruthless treatment of Rachel. OmniStream's board of directors, panicked by his erratic behavior and PR disasters, forced him to step down as CEO, transitioning him to a silent board member. He was richer than ever, yet completely, utterly bankrupt. Desperation breeds humility. On a rainy Tuesday evening, exactly 4 years after he had found Rachel crying in their kitchen, Donald drove his luxury sedan up the winding driveway of Rachel's Bellevue estate. It was a beautiful, sprawling home, wrapped in warm cedar and glowing with golden light from the windows. He didn't bring lawyers. He didn't bring threats. He stood on the porch in the freezing rain and rang the doorbell. Rachel opened the door. She was wearing comfortable yoga pants and a soft, oversized sweater, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked healthy, vibrant, and deeply at peace. She looked at the soaked, defeated billionaire on her porch without an ounce of pity. "You have 5 minutes, Donald. Thomas is putting the boys to bed," she said, leaning against the doorframe, blocking his entry. "I lost everything," Donald said, his voice cracking. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "Chloe left. The board pushed me out. I have all the money in the world, Rachel, and I have never been so empty." "Are you looking for absolution, Donald? Because I don't stock that here." "I'm looking for mercy," he whispered, tears finally mixing with the rain on his face. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I was a monster to you. You were the only real thing in my life, and I threw you away because I was blinded by ego. I don't want your money. I don't want custody. I just want to know them. Even if I'm just Uncle Donald. Please, Rachel, I'm begging you." Rachel stared at him for a long, quiet moment. The rain hammered against the slate roof of the porch. She thought about the endless nights she had cried herself to sleep, the terror of discovering she was pregnant with triplets while facing eviction, and the grueling, exhausting years of building her company while raising 3 infants alone. She owed him nothing. But Rachel Higgins was not a cruel woman. She was simply a strong one. "If I allow this," Rachel said, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain, "it is on my terms, completely." Donald nodded frantically. "Anything." Rachel stood tall, listing her boundaries with the precision of the CEO she was. "No unannounced visits. You will see them once a month, on a Saturday, supervised by Thomas or myself. No undermining. Thomas is their father in every way that matters. You are a biological relative. You will not confuse them. No media. If a single photograph of my sons ends up in the press connected to you, the arrangement is permanently terminated. Respect. You will never, ever speak down to me again. If you show even a sliver of the arrogance you possessed during our marriage, you will never see the driveway of this house again. I swear, Donald breathed, closing his eyes in profound relief. I swear it, Rachel. Thank you. Don't thank me, Rachel said softly, stepping back to close the door. Thank the woman you used to call fat and lazy, because she's the one who built the grace to forgive you. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Donald alone on the porch in the rain. He walked back to his empty car, stripped of his ego, his empire, and his pride. Yet for the first time in years, as he started the engine, he felt a faint, fragile flicker of hope. True wealth is not measured by the commas in a bank account, but by the loyalty of those who stand by you in the darkest hours. Donald Scott traded a priceless foundation for a glittering illusion. In the end, his billions could not buy back his family, his pride, or the years he lost. Rachel proved that the best revenge isn't destruction. It is massive, unapologetic, and beautifully lived success.